Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein.
Hello.
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, but do we have to talk about Elon Musk again?
Well, he's doing so much. I mean, it's hard to ignore him. I think part of the reason is he likes to be the center of attention, and we probably just feed that by talking about him. But when he does things like sends out a poll that says, "Should I stay on as CEO or not?" and people say no, I mean that's news.
Well, whether or not it's news, it's also not to be trusted.
Oh, for
He's done
sure.
brilliant jobs creating SpaceX and Starlink and Tesla.
Hmm.
Un- Among the most remarkable achievements in business in the last 50 years. He also, on a regular basis, lies.
Yeah.
Uh, and he definitely makes wild statements that he never was going to live up to.
Hmm.
But it might be good. Uh, it's funny how he put it. He said, okay, I'm going to resign as soon as I find anybody who could do a good job taking over from me. And then he said, but nobody wants the job. It's so thankless. All you get is criticized. Uh, and So maybe he'll keep it for 5 years because he claims nobody applied for the job worth a darn.
Well,
Actually, every
as by far the principal primary stockholder, my sense, David, you tell me what you think, is even if he hires somebody as CEO, he's going to be in the background pulling the strings. And if he wants so and so thrown off the platform, I imagine he will find a way to get that message to the CEO, among other things that he wants to see done.
yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think he could actually retire? Lead the CEO position and relinquish influence over the company?
Well, he's looking forward to going to Mars soon,
Hmm.
uh, and it'll be hard for him to run anything from there. The internet does reach there. Vint Cerf personally has inspired the interplanetary chapter of the Internet Society, where in fact they work on things like how you would connect to Mars on the internet. Because the internet that we use is designed for reasonably fast connections. If something doesn't go across, you ask the other side, send it again, and you get it, you can get it in a tenth of a second. That's not going to work on Mars, which is something like 2.5 minutes away by the speed of light. I don't remember the number for sure, but it's enough to mean you have to have a totally different protocol to run from the Earth to Mars. Uh,
That's interesting that, in fact, we're talking about that. I mean, Vint Cerf, I know he's one of the founders of the internet itself and quite a visionary. But just the fact that we're talking about interplanetary internet communications, that's pretty amazing.
uh, it, it's kind of
Yeah.
I disagree
Okay.
because Oppie has to call home. I think I talked about Oppie here on the show. I
Oh,
just saw Avatar. Jenny's
mm-hmm.
in the Producers Guild, so we see a lot of movies. Seen almost everything this year. Uh, but I still think Oppie is the best movie of the year, even though nobody has heard of it and nobody particularly is going to watch it.
Yeah, remind me of that, Dave. You may have mentioned it before, but I certainly have no recall. What is that?
Oppie is a movie about a couple of dozen people working together, one of whom is not a person. Oppie was the Opportunity rover that spent 6 years going back and forth across Mars. What makes the movie unforgettable is that Industrial Light and Magic created Mars for the movie. CGI of quality that has never been matched. But the other thing is that it became clear that Appy in the movie had a personality and was a person, and people were relating to him. I'm talking about the engineers who, for years and years, ran the project.
Mm-hmm.
It was more than 6 years. I forget how much. Uh, and it was cut really well. As I say, Jenny's in the biz, so I've learned a little bit to keep you moving, let you constantly think, okay, what's coming next? And giving you a good answer to that that left you feeling very satisfied. That's unlike another movie, which is possibly the greatest visual film of all time. Lots of CGI, but a whole lot of it was done live.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking, of course, about, do I mean Titanic? No, his new one, Avatar 2.
Okay.
Uh, it is unforgettable what it does, including about an hour of scenes that were basically filmed underwater.
Mm.
Some of which Sigourney Weaver, who plays in, well, she's a good story to follow this with, had to learn to hold her breath for 7 minutes.
7 minutes? Come on, Dave. You can't do that.
Well,
Come on,
that's what they
7 minutes.
claim.
3 minutes, 3, 4 minutes is the limit. That's what I've always heard.
I don't know. As I say, that's what they claim. I wasn't there to check her.
Okay.
Uh,
But now,
and
even
there's
with
no
CGI, with
video
even with
about that
computer
particular
generated
stunt. No,
stuff, Dave, that much of the film was actually filmed underwater. That's what you're telling me?
I don't know,
Okay.
because the CGI, which it was Weta Industrial Light and Magic had a piece of it, was so good.
Mm-hmm. Can't tell.
Nobody could tell
Mm-hmm.
whether that was something filmed, as many were, in the enormous fish tanks that they built in Hollywood to shoot underwater scenes,
Mm-hmm.
or totally generated by CGI. And how good is this technology going? Sigourney Weaver's breakthrough in her career was a while back. Alien is almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, that was like in 1981 or so.
She's 75 years old,
Hmm.
and she played a 15-year-old, and it worked.
Oh, come on. Really?
Yeah. Nearly everything was not shot against scenery or even backgrounds. It was all shot with a motion capture rig that got everything the actors' faces were doing and how they moved.
Mm-hmm.
That all through the movie. It's never been done like that before. He had to top his last movie, and Avatar had a lot of good stuff to get to do something real incredible. I thought he was going to create totally synthetic actors, which is possible now, but he chose not to do that. He took actors, admittedly, not the best actors, put them in this motion capture rig in New Zealand and in Los Angeles, and then had hundreds of artists first turn that face's motion capture into a character, building the character, and then do whatever they wanted to do with it, including taking the facial expressions of 75-year-old Sigourney Weaver, and put her in the body and adjust her face so that she was a perfectly plausible 15-year-old blue character.
Wow.
Characters are all blue. And I read an interview with her. She's surprisingly interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was Sylvester Reaver, who almost invented network TV. I hadn't known that connection. But she grew too tall. By the time she was 11 or 12, she was something like 5'10".
Hmm.
So she stood out. She's over 6 foot finally.
Really?
And everybody teased her unmercifully.
Hmm.
She was on some very respected schools, and she hated them because kids often destroy people who are different.
Yeah. Yeah, sure do.
And that happened to her. Nobody thought she was beautiful.
Hmm.
Uh, and now she's one of the most successful actresses of all time.
Wow. That's some story.
Another lady in blue was Zoe Solana, who has actually got one of the two lead parts and looks lovely as she does, and is given some emotion to show in this movie, which she is not going to win the Best Actress award for. Uh, but she has an incredible run of movies. Besides the two Avatars, she was in five Marvel movies. Three of them were Guardians of the Galaxy, and two of them were Avengers. So she has apparently the record for the actor who played in the most valuable movies of all time. Her movies have made $11 billion.
Wow.
If she had 1% of that, she would be very wealthy.
But she probably doesn't hire Ann, right?
She might get 1%.
Mhm.
Certainly by the sequel to Avatar. What's coming next? The director came to the screening we were at.
Now,
Oh, other
that's
thing
not
about this,
Cameron, the director. That's somebody else, right?
no, that's Jim Cameron,
Okay.
the king of the world,
Hmm.
and he's very interesting. He has a lot of thoughts that were worth following. Uh, so it was a pleasure listening to him. But there there are already four more movies written.
God,
He's already shot two and a half of them, although
mhm.
took him 3 years to edit this one, so don't expect them very soon. And this movie made 450 million in its first weekend.
Mm.
So the money is there, even though he spent
Wow.
$300 million on this film.
Wow. But if he
Disney
can gross
Fox is,
450 in a weekend, Dave, that ain't that's pretty good ratio.
yeah,
Well, now, Dave,
yeah.
tell us a little bit more about some of the effects. You said that this was visually one of the most compelling movies you've ever seen. In addition to, the CGI with the making an older person look young and putting them in another body, what are some of the other things visually that you saw that struck you?
Well, this is the first movie I've seen in 10 years that's worth paying extra for to see in 3D.
Okay.
Cameron, for Avatar, mastered and created many of the best techniques for doing 3D filming. When Avatar came out, I also got a chance to listen to him. And he said that what he could do in 3D was so remarkable that all his friends, the A-list directors who have the option to do things however they want, were going to demand 3D from then on. In fact, I apparently sent a note. I wrote about that, and it got circulated on AT&T, and I got a note from a vice president with the comments from the CEO of AT&T about why everything's going to be 3D. And I believe Cameron, partly because he did it so well.
Hmm.
The 3D is not very obvious.
Mm.
There are none of the special effects to prove. It's just every scene was lit in such a way and shot in such a way. It's not easy. He's talked about it in interviews. that it looked far more realistic than any other movie I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worth seeing it in 3D. He's the master.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all the 3D movies you see are shot as 2D movies, and then using computer graphics, a 3D version is made. The problem with that is that shooting for 3D to get stuff that really works requires very different lighting, really two cameras, not just special effects to create it, and a selection of the shots that you're going to use that is very different. He has to be very specific on where he's going with long shots, where he's going with close ups, how they relate to each other to make the 3D work.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it. So that's one of the great things that they did in this movie. 3D like you've never seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually looking forward. Jenny's gone to them twice. I
Wow.
didn't go to the second one
Mm-hmm.
because, as I say, she's in the biz, and to see what can be done was worth
Yeah.
two things. Even though it was a boring 3.5 hour movie,
3.5 hours? Oh my goodness.
three hours and something.
Wow. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Now,
but the
now,
next
now,
night
Dave,
she went back and
he
was
did.
very happy she did.
He saw
She said
saw
it
the
was
3.5 hour
remarkable.
movie twice.
I'm sorry?
He saw the 3.5 hour movie twice.
Jenny went back the next night.
Wow.
Uh, where the next night Sigourney Weaver came for the Q&A. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
She's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But Sigourney Weaver, who does something that no actress playing Juliet ever did, legitimately play a teenager and look like a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
kind of
they did
amazing. At,
that
at
as a
75 years old. Mm-hmm.
75. They did that by putting her in a rig that captured all her facial movements, from what her mouth was like when she was talking to how her eyes moved.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, they could reproduce her performance on a body they created of a 15-year-old teenage girl.
Mm. Wow.
And how well did it work? Well, I happen to have read one of the reviews that explained that was what happened in this movie. But watching the movie, I wasn't sure which of three 15-year-old girls was Sigourney Weaver
Mm. Wow.
and which were two actresses that were an appropriate age.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
So
that's amazing. The
that's where it's going.
technology is just like so incredible. It's almost out of thin air. It can do so much. Speaking of which, I mean, it's kind of parallel. We talked about Dolly before. I don't even know what you call it, but this is a 3D rendition creation of images from spoken word or text word. No? What?
Now, Dolly is 2D,
Mm-hmm.
and like any artist working in 2D, they can suggest depth. You can draw a box on on a 2D piece of paper. The new one, whose name I forget, you
Point
have in the
E.
front,
Point E.
uses the same underlying engine, ChatGPT 3, as Dolly, but creates 3D animations. And you can just turn there and say, Stu Reed playing Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm.
And it will come up with the 3D animation of Stu Reed playing Santa Claus. Now, this is enormous power, and it's available to you. The easiest way is to just go to open.ai and sign up for access to Dolly. They are making it totally free for the moment, saying it is a preview. And one day they'll charge for it. And they figured that their cost right now is about 12 cents for each picture you make.
Hmm.
They raised $1.5 billion to get going. There's several hundred million of that from Elon Musk, who
Mhm.
believes in what AI can do. So they have the funds to do what nobody else can do. Now you can actually do the 3D. It was just announced, I think, this morning, and I haven't played with it yet. Perhaps even, yes, that is going to put a lot of artists out of work.
So how does it work, David? Tell us about this. Is the Point E text to 3D image maker? What's the process?
Okay, we just talked about Elon Musk wanting to go to Mars, and I brought up uh, that Vint Cerf and others have been working for many years on the internet protocols that will be required to work effectively between Mars and the Earth, which is two minutes plus away from us by the speed of light. You have to throw in really robust error checking is the one thing I remember. Okay, so if I wanted to get a picture of Vint Cerf, the guy who programmed much of the early internet, with three little green men on a background of a sand dune, I could plug that in to DALL-E, which is named after the artist and also after the movie WALL-E, uh, and get a picture that is professional quality if you don't have such high demands for what professional is, but certainly usable if I wrote an article about the Interplanetary Internet Society.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've 3 times gone to DALL-E when I didn't find a good illustration for what I needed, and put in the title of the article and maybe another few words, and came up with an illustration that was perfectly appropriate, and it was as good as many professional artists would create. Now, whether that's going to be creative, how that affects our understanding of art. Oh, I'm reading more about those questions that I even am about Elon Musk or the king of the world, Jim Cameron, who's just made the most incredible movie possibly ever made. That good, the visuals, pretty awful, the dialogue and plot.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what the other thing that comes from OpenAI is created with the same artificial intelligence agent called GPT-3, and it's called ChatGPT. There, you take words and ask for more words. So you could write the first paragraph of an article about what is ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to start with that as a base and write about how important are the problems of censorship using ChatGPT. And it will come up with a perfectly grammatical paragraph or 4 about the problems censoring the ChatGPT.
So let me just see if I understand. In the way that DALL-E creates images, just from a text cue, you're saying that this chat AI program will now create written paragraph
and
or
to show off how good it was, 2 of the writers included a paragraph written by ChatGPT that worked perfectly well in their article, was in the style of the writer, and they didn't tell you to the end of the article that some part of that article is written by a computer.
wow.
Yeah. But we
Wow.
have to take a break.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, okay. But when it come back, there's some more stuff going on with AI, more local. that might be of interest to New Yorkers in particular. You're listening to Community Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief break.
I really can't stay.
Betty, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
Betty, it's cold out there.
This evening has been
hoping that you drop in.
so very nice.
I'll hold your hand. They're just like
My
ice.
mother will start to worry,
Beautiful, what's your hurry?
and father will be pacing the
Listen
floor.
to that fireplace.
So really I'd better scurry.
Beautiful, please don't
Well,
hurry.
maybe just to have
Why
a
don't
drink.
you put some records on while I pour?
And the neighbors might think,
Betty, it's bad out there.
say, what's in this drink?
No cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew how
Your eyes are like starlight now.
to break the spell.
I'll take your hat. Your hair looks
I
well.
ought to say no, no, no,
Mind
sir.
if I move in
At
closer?
least I'm gonna say that I tried.
What's the sense of hurting my pride?
I really can't stay.
Baby, don't hold out.
Ah, but it's cold
outside.
outside. I simply must go.
Betty, it's cold outside.
The answer is no.
I say it's cold out there.
The welcome has been
How lucky that you dropped in.
so nice and warm.
Look out that window. Who had that
My
storm?
sister will be suspicious.
Your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there at the door.
Waves up on a tropical
My
shore.
maiden aunt's mind is vicious.
Your lips are delicious.
Well, maybe just a cigarette
Oh,
more.
never such a blizzard before.
I've got to go home.
Better you freeze out there.
Say, lend me your comb.
It's up to your knees out there.
You've really been great.
I thrill when you touch my hand.
But don't you see?
How can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be time
Think
tomorrow.
of my lifelong sorrow.
At least there will be plenty implied.
If you caught pneumonia and
I
died,
really can't stay.
get over that old now.
Oh, but it's cold.
Okay, we're back. Community Technology, Dave Burstein, Stu Reed. Dave, what's up?
I think Chuck Dolan is a schmuck. He's the CEO and controlling
Chuck
thing.
or Jimmy?
Chuck.
The old man. He's still on the
No,
planet.
did I get him backwards? I got him
Yeah, Chuck
backwards.
is the old man. It's amazing.
Chuck Dolan is perfectly reasonable. Jimmy Dolan is a schmuck.
Mm-hmm.
What he did with Madison Square Garden, the cable systems he runs, how he treated his employees, and so on, leave me with no respect for him. They are probably not listening to this show.
That's a
But
good
if
bet.
they caught my saying that, and I walked into a Knicks game, I might very well be stopped at the door and told, you are not allowed into this building. Why? Because any enemy of Jimmy Dolan is not allowed into the building, and they enforce it by doing facial recognition on the 20,000 people who walk into Madison Square Garden for a show. This show was actually the Rockettes, which I think he also owns.
Yes.
And a woman walking in with a Girl Scout troop that included her daughter was stopped at the door and refused admission. Why? Because she happens to work for, she's not the least bit involved, but she works for a law firm that was suing Jimmy Dolan for something totally unrelated to anything that was going on, and she had nothing to do with it. But to punish that law firm and maybe make people reluctant to sue Jimmy Dolan, anybody whose picture they could get is on the facial recognition system at Madison Square Garden and not allowed into the building. So I never can get Knicks tickets anyway, and they're bloody expensive. So it may not hurt me any not being able to go to the Garden. But somebody who criticizes Dolan or his company, somebody who says Madison Square Garden should not exist at this point. It was what sure smelled like a crooked deal in Albany that allowed the Garden to stay where it is instead of using that space to rebuild Penn Station and rebuild the Garden somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I have no evidence whatsoever that the Dolan family paid off people in Albany, but it sure smelled like that.
Mm-hmm.
And because I said something like that about the owner of Madison Square Garden, they do try to see my face as I walk in, see it's somebody they don't approve of, and not let me into the building.
Yeah, that's incredible, Dave, that they would do that and they're getting away with that. I understand from the article that I read about this incident, another person from the law firm where the young lady is employed has filed suit against Chuck Dolan, rather Jimmy Dolan and MSG around this very issue. I mean, to me, I don't know how what kind of grounds they could stand on. They claim that this is MSG claiming that they don't want any attorneys that have litigation against them to be in the premises. I guess to perhaps gather additional information or data related to a pending lawsuit, but it just seems so specious. And as you mentioned earlier, this particular woman has nothing to do with the lawsuit coming out of that law firm. I mean, that they could deny entry into a public establishment just is astounding.
As far as I know, it's perfectly legal. I am not a lawyer, of course. But as far as I know, there's no law against discriminating against lawyers. And in fact, the story I believe, and why I know this, is that it was a landlord who refused to rent any apartment in his building to lawyers, saying the last thing he needs is a troublemaker who could go to court anytime and tie up the whole building in litigation. The lawyer, of course, went to court trying to get the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And as I remember it, this is like 20 years ago, the ruling was that while you can't discriminate about race, religion, sexual orientation in most civilized societies, there's no law against discriminating against lawyers and not renting to them.
That's astounding, Dave.
Again, this is my memory from 20 years ago. I could have this totally wrong.
This particular lawsuit that is attempting to overturn the policy says one of the things they're doing is they're going against the New York State Liquor Authority. The garden serves liquor. They have a license provided by the New York State Liquor Authority, and they claim that the Liquor Authority says that they have to make the place open and available to everyone. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Well, we know where it's going, or we know where facial recognition is going. It is used massively around the world. I will almost guarantee you that anybody walking into a Chinese or US embassy in any country has their face scanned as they walk in and identified. We know that works. As we're talking, we picked out 120,000 people walking into Madison Square Garden. And the Chinese security services and the US security services, both of whom are very competent, would be totally negligent if they didn't check out anybody walking into an embassy.
Yeah, but it's what you do with that information, Dave. That's the real scary
You turn
part.
around and say, this person was seen in the same picture as somebody in Al Qaeda. He may have a bomb. Stop him and strip search. Or don't let him in. And that's the kind of thing that I am sure the security agencies are doing routinely now because it works.
You know, these days you can't go into any major building, even some private buildings, certainly public buildings, without showing ID. So, I mean, you know, you got to say, this is who I am. Here's my driver's license. And so, you know, the establishment has some basic data on who you are and who's coming and going in their premises right there using, you know, old school traditional methods. So, I mean, the AI has just taken it to a whole nother level where they just look at you and they got you. But my sense, what do you do with that? Okay, you got that information. What do you do with it? I mean, in MSG's case, they deny entry to the building. I mean, there's so many other things and nefarious things that could be done with that information. To me, that's where the real danger lies, not in the technology itself, but how they use it.
Now, I will guarantee you that when a building in New York admits they're using facial recognition to see who they would let into the building, they will talk about the public benefit. You won't have to wait online to have your ID checked when you walk into Mount Sinai Hospital. You'll get in faster. This is a big public advantage of the AI knowing everybody and watching everybody. The New York subway system has actually bought a system that had that kind of AI capability, and they swear they haven't turned it on. And I have no reason to think they lied about that. But that will be routine. And a few years ago, I walked down there's a long tunnel going from Times Square subway station to one of the other subway lines. It's about 1/8 of a mile, I think. And I walked down that tunnel a few days after somebody was caught in that tunnel with a bomb. It had gone off as I remember it. I don't think anybody was hurt, but it made all the papers, a bomb in Times Square subway station. And I realized when I was changing trains a few days ago, I've walked right past the spot where the bomb had been. Will facial recognition catch every bomber? No, but it works so well that it would catch 9 out of 10 people they want to stop. And so it is going to be used everywhere. I suspect that Macy's is already using it from anybody who walks in.
That's your
No,
surmise, or you know that, Dave?
I do not know it. I
Okay.
know the technology. I know companies selling the technology,
Mm-hmm.
and what it's being used for on the record is you turn out and see, oh, somebody is walking around the third floor looking like they're lost. You better put better signs on the third floor so people don't get lost and mad at you, Macy's. And things like that. It's now routine using your cell phone
Mm-hmm.
to track you. Your cell phone can be identified usually, and see what you did when you were in the store. Did you stop at the cosmetic counter and spend 15 minutes there uh, sampling everything and then not buy anything because you're going to go buy it somewhere else at a discount? There are systems now available commercially that can do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it is going to be done. We live in a surveillance state.
Yes, we do.
It
Mm-hmm.
is not nearly as involved as the Chinese surveillance state. And most people listening to this think our government or our corporations are not going to will use this kind of facial recognition to prevent the next bomber, not to figure out how many people should not be allowed into that is the Square Garden. But it's the same technology, and that's what AI can do.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go back to the story we were talking about before, because we mentioned ChatGPT.
Yes.
ChatGPT is able to take samples of a writer's style, a short prompt about what something should be, 100 million websites and books that have been scanned in, and using what it understands from that 100 million and come up with a perfectly plausible paragraph or three or complete article that is in that style, reads reasonably well. And I think it was in the Atlantic, was a high school teacher saying it was better than what he was getting from many of his students, and he wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There are actually a lot of researchers now working on how you can tell the difference and how you can tell deep fake photos. It's that good.
Wow, that's
But,
crazy.
and the people at OpenAI are completely open about this, and they talk about it. It will make errors. That why the stuff works, maybe 90% accuracy on what's the right thing to say, it still gets a whole lot of things wrong. I threw in my name, David Burstein, writer. It picked up things I had done and a number of perfectly true, appropriate things to say about me if I had a bio. But it also said I wrote a particular book, and I had never even heard the title of that book.
Mm.
So, yes, it's good. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it is going to be wonderful in some ways, but don't trust it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Now, speaking of which, Dave, I wanted to swing back again to the AI. I'm not the AI, to the facial recognition technology.
That's all done by AI.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's what runs it, right? And the privacy issues. And talk for a minute. We only got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk for a minute about the lawsuit against the maker of Epic, the maker of Fortnite video game. 400 million users worldwide, and apparently, this company, Epic, has been doing all kinds of things, including invading kids' privacy, collecting all kind of data about kids, and then in the background taking money from them for different things that you do on the game during the game without notifying them, without getting their parents' permission. and something I hadn't heard of this term. You probably have something called dark patterns.
I
It's
hadn't heard about it till Epic was
yeah, I mean,
fine for it.
apparently it's stuff going on in the background of the game that is tracking you and extracting money from your debit card or credit card.
Let me explain it a little bit.
Okay.
Dark patterns are called dark patterns because they are things that say, buy this avatar or get this weapon. Put on the screen, dark, hard to see, looks very similar to the background it's in, so that a number of people, millions actually, will accidentally click on the button and be charged. That is clearly illegal for kids under 13 in the United States, and probably fraudulent advertising. The FTC, Lina Khan, has been doing a lot of stuff that we can believe in about trying to tame companies that abuse us. This is abuse. Selling you stuff you don't even know you're buying, especially if you're 7 years old, is definitely something that should be illegal. They wound up settling the case for $450 million. That implies that Epic paid that much money, agreed to, without needing a judge telling them to, because it would have been much more expensive if they had gone to court and lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very glad of this case setting a precedent. For 25 years, I'm reporting about phone companies that are so big that they can get a $15 million fine and essentially ignore it. If you're Google, a $1 trillion company, or AT&T, which may be only worth $150 million, if you pay a $30 million fine because your executive was proven to pay off an Illinois legislator, that is totally immaterial to the company. When they had competition from other phone companies around the year 2000, there were laws that protected those phone companies and gave them access. And every month, there was another state or federal lawsuit against Verizon and AT&T, and then called SBC. They just totally ignored the law. And they'd get fined millions. And they yawn.
Mm-hmm.
This example of paying a fine because they were caught paying off a legislator in Illinois is not my invention. It happened about 2 months ago. They paid a fine. The only reason they were caught is because somebody who was involved in some related bribery turned state's evidence and identified the payoff that had come from AT&T. Now, was the CEO of AT&T, did he lose his $15 million bonus for the year?
Probably
No
not.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Was the head of lobbying AT&T fired? Because they should have a procedure in place that prevents illegal things like this from happening. Same woman as it was before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so on. I am sure that even if AT&T at the top doesn't believe in payoffs, they've done dozens of them in the last decade. Because somebody whose job is to persuade the Illinois or Montana state legislature to pass a bill that AT&T wants will be enormously tempted to find some way to buy a legislator.
Mm-hmm.
You do it by giving, you don't necessarily have to hand them cash in an envelope in the men's room. You do that by giving a $500,000 consulting contract to the law partner. And you don't know what the money was used for.
Mhm.
It's not illegal to hire a lawyer and pay them $500,000, even if they don't do any work for you, who just happens to be the partner or best friend or brother of the lawyer, the legislator you want to influence.
Mhm.
That happens every day,
Yeah.
even in companies that don't want their employees doing it.
Mhm.
And I don't think Bill Kennard wanted to pay off the Illinois legislature. But the people who work for him were told, you want to keep your job, you get this bill through.
Mhm.
And that's
And
what
don't,
happens.
and you don't have to tell me how. Well, Dave, do you
Yeah.
think these larger fines are going to start to have an impact? This fine against settlement, I should say, with Epic, the maker of Fortnite, was almost $500 million. As you said,
The
they paid them
evidence is they won't.
they what?
The evidence is they won't stop it.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is the European Union has had several multi-billion-dollar fines against Google and Amazon for various violations, in particular their antitrust competition law. And it hasn't stopped.
Mm.
The main visible effect is that Google now has hired hundreds, Facebook as well, hundreds of politically connected people in Europe to prevent the next $4 billion fine.
Mm-hmm.
And the US government, supporting US companies as we do, is in there putting heavy diplomatic pressure on the countries not to do anything against the US giants.
Yeah.
So they're changing a little bit of their behavior. Facebook may allow, Apple may allow you to get your apps from somebody other than Apple, and maybe they charge less than the 30% that Apple rakes off the top. So there will be some changes, because it's better to make some changes than to be castigated for a decade and getting a $5 billion fine. But it's not enough of a fine to stop the companies from making
So the beat goes on. Okay, we're just about out of time here, Dave. This has been fascinating. We've been talking Stu Reed, Dave Burstein, on community and technology, talked about AI, talked about CGI, and the latest Avatar movie, which Dave recommends for its effects, not for the storyline, 3.5 hours of story, but incredibly powerful visual experience. And Point E, which is something that folks should check out on is it AI One, Dave? What's the name of the company that
the company is Open.ai.
Open.ai. Yeah, check it out.
In San Francisco. It raised over $1 billion. A lot of the Silicon Valley people said, we need something like this.
Yeah.
And
but regular folks can go on and play around with it, right, Dave?
I can go there, as I have, and say, I want a picture of 5G in India, and get a picture that has a 5G logo against some symbol of India.
Mm-hmm.
They'll give me the Taj Mahal or something like that. Drawn quite well. Better than I could draw it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dave. Again, this has been Dave Burstein and Stu Reed, Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. for more Tech Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.